My name is Kayleigh Erickson. I'm running for re-election as the chair of the UVSS, and I'm running with Refresh UVic. I think multiple reasons. I think, this year I had the pleasure of starting the mental health campaign with Katerina Perlova and our mental health committee, and we've just seen such success from it. We had assist training this year for a hugely subsidized cost. I was able to take on individual advocacy. For example, I had a student who the Martlet actually wrote about, and he had to go to the washroom during his engineering exam. And because of that, he wasn't allowed re-entry. And so he came to me and we had a long conversation, and my heart just broke because seeing how that impacted a student just really, hit me. And I said, you know what? In my position, I have the power to change these things. And so I went to Senate and I talked to the university and I said, this can't happen. And I took it to my committee, the Senate Committee for Academic Standards, and I said, we need to find out how we can have a standardized policy so students aren't impacted like this. And they said, okay. And we ended up taking it to Senate, and we ended up passing a uniform policy so things like that never happen again. And so I think there's that portion of it for sure. I also think this year I was the director of the food bank, and that really opened my eyes to seeing, the struggles that students have. And I've been really thinking about how I can help in that process. And so this year I worked towards diversifying the food bank, and now I'm looking at actually making it a charitable organization. And so it's going to be a lot of work. I've already started the process, and I think it's going to take about a year. And so I'd really like to be reelected so I can be part of that and continue to help our accounting department to make sure that they're able to do it. I think my experience, in my first year I ran as a director at large because I was really excited about getting involved in the board. And through that, I joined as many committees as possible. So I kind of understood how the organization functioned and what my role was within it. And then I ran for chair in my second year. And through the last year, I've been able to make so many relationships with people all across campus, whether that's, being a CL for the last 2 years and having a connection to Res Life, or working with Equity and Human Rights this year when I changed a harassment policy, or the university on Senate and Board of Governors. I now understand, the community and the culture that we have at UVic. And if I need to get anything done, I know where to go and I know how to do it. Over the last 2 years, I've had the ability to create my own slate. And it's a lot of work, but basically you go around and you find people from different parts of the university who have varied interests, who are involved in different things and have different perspectives, but they all agree on the same common values and the same goals. And so this year I was really lucky to put together a slate that I'm really excited about. I think that they're extremely passionate, they're excited, and they just want to do great work. And a lot of them have fantastic ideas. And so I'm really excited to have the ability to not only be elected, but to be working with this wonderful group of people. I'm in favor of all of them. So starting with the campus community gardens, I live in the sustainability residence on campus. And so I have two floors of sustainability students, two of which are running on my slate, Elise Puller and Philip Schroed. And I've really seen the impact that having a campus community gardens is on their education. Because they're no longer just learning about sustainability in their classroom, they're able to have hands-on skills in the campus community gardens, and that's why I'm in favor of that referendum. The second one on the Students of Color Collective. They're the only advocacy group that isn't funded through referendum from students. And so every year they have to try finding money through the UVSS committees. And I think it would be really nice to instead have them funded by students and then use that money to reallocate to something that we think is important, in particular maybe advocacy events. And then there's a question on the food bank. And of course, being the director of the food bank this year, I know how important and vital that service is for students. And we're not increasing student fees by doing it. What we're doing is we're taking election office money that we're not using during the elections, so just kind of sitting there not doing anything. And we're putting that into our food bank. So it's just kind of money that's not doing anything that could be going towards our great service. Mm-hmm. And lastly, there's divestment. And you know what? I'm really excited that that question's on for referendum this year, because I understand as a student leader how frustrating it is to go to your government on something you care about and see no progress. And you keep going and you keep going, hoping things are going to change. And then finally one day you say, all right, either I'm going to run or I'm going to do something about this. I'm going to start a grassroots movement with students all across Canada, across the globe. And I'm going to make sure they understand that continuing to invest in the oil industry is harming our environment and we need to move away from it. Mm-hmm. And I completely agree. And I'm so glad that students are that passionate that they're able to organize as great as they have been and go out there and try changing things. And so I think the wording of the question could have been a little bit better. I think it's really vague and it's really subjective because it talks about just reinvesting in more sustainable alternatives. But depending on who's reading that, it really depends on what they take away. So for example, divest from coal, reinvest in natural gas. Well, that's more sustainable, but that's definitely not the intent. And so it's more, how can we find a way to reinvest in something that's more sustainable? And I'd really like to see that referendum pass because I would like to work with Wesley Boyd, Director of External Relations, and Lloyd Lynn, our Director of Finance and Operations, to find a way where we can try researching as much as possible into how other universities have successfully done it, into what stocks and companies are looking great now that are, solar and wind energy potentially, and where we can reinvest to make sure that students don't lose out on money, but also we're moving our country in the way that's more sustainable. I think I accomplished more than I thought I could do in a year because I was very ambitious. And people said that to me last year. They said, you have a lot of things on your platform. Are you able to do them all? And I was like, you know what? It depends on your attitude. If you go in there and you're like, I'm going to do this, then you can. And I think I did. I really focused on my mental health campaign this year with people on the board. And it was just such a huge success. I got the first UVSS grant ever. And I'm someone that doesn't know how to grant write, but I sat down and I was like, I'm really passionate about this and I want it. So I did it, and the food bank, working towards diversifying and making sure that it's not just Western style food because we have students that are international students and you want to make them feel like they're at home too. Sub renovations. We opened our new transit loop this year. And as soon as that happened, well, unfortunately, it took over all the disability parking. And so right away, I'm someone that thinks on my feet and I said, well, how can I help? And I went to SST and we had a conversation and I started a petition the next day. And I petitioned community members, students, faculty. And I took it to one of my meetings at the university and I showed them and I said, this is an issue and we need to address it. And I worked with them for months. And now you'll probably notice there's a few spots outside of Felicitas that are for disability parking. And so, I'm just someone that wants to help as much as possible. And if there's ever something going wrong, I want someone to come talk to me about it so I can find a way to fix it. Oh, there's so many things. Well, one is the food bank. I really want to make it a charity organization because I think that there's so many people who want to donate who end up deciding not to because they don't get a charitable tax receipt. And that's unfortunate because it's a lot of lost revenue that we could be having. And especially since we self-fund, we can only afford to put so much into it before we have to increase student fees. And it seems counterproductive to say, pay for a service that we have because you can't afford to pay for things. And so I really think we want to see community members step up, and it's a great way to put more money into our service. Mental health is another huge one that's on my platform. And for things that I want to see over the next year, I want to see a sustained assist training session. I want to see an HR person within the UVSS who's trained in mental health first aid, who can continue to educate faculty, students, staff, every year for $35 or $50 so we can do it in-house. I think it's really important that I've been working with our health and dental plan for the last year to increase coverage for counseling. And now I asked them, I said, well, in order to get counseling, don't you have to get a doctor's note to then go to see a counselor and to have it count? And they said, yes. And I said, that's wrong to me. You should not have to go see a doctor and have them decide whether or not you're stressed enough to go see a counselor. I think that's a huge barrier to services and to getting the help that you need. And so I said, I want to change that. And the lady looked at me and she said, you would be the first university under us to ever do that. And I said, good, because we should be the leaders in mental health. Other things I want to do is I wrote down engagement. I think it's so important that we continually try engaging with our membership. We try being more creative with how we structure SAGMs and AGMs. We, are more sustainable, not only financially and environmentally, but socially. There's huge issues in Victoria like homelessness. And one of our main campaigns is affordable housing. And so it's great. We should be still pushing to decrease those resident fee increases and make it affordable for students on our campus, but also within our community, because I want to make sure that students, when they leave UVic, have a social safety net so they never end up homeless.